Welcome to the Money Over 50 podcast, brought to you by Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue from Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. This information is general in nature and does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. Therefore, you should consider whether the information is appropriate for you and your personal circumstances. If you require personal advice, please contact Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. Here are your hosts, Dallas Davison and Michael Hogue.
Welcome to Money Over 50 with Dallas and Michael. Dallas, your topic today, why your house is more like a car than a super fund. Now, just before we come on air, I said, what's the point of this, Dallas? What's the point?
You always want to take my conceptual sort of, theory-based podcasts and make them more practical. I just like to ponder these sorts of theories. But the point, since you made me make it more,
I think it's good to get the point out straight away in this circumstance.
The point when I say your house is more like a car than a super fund, when we're talking to people about what assets and liabilities they've got approaching retirement, it's okay. What do you own? What are your retirement savings? One of the things that people list is their house. It's first and foremost, it seems to spring to front of mind of like, this is an asset that I own. It's a part of my retirement savings. Now, that's only the case if your plan is to sell your house at retirement or during your retirement. For most people, if you have your house, that's where you live all your life. That's where you want to live all your life. It may well be valuable. It might even grow in value. I'm not making a distinction there, but it does not form an asset for the purpose of your retirement savings. It is not something that you can use to fund your income needs in retirement. And what I mean, and when I say it's more like your car than your super fund, your car is much the same. If you've got a car that's worth $30,000, fantastic. You need a car. You might need a car. You need some way to get around. You need transport. That's fine. I know you need that, but it doesn't. It's not something that you can use to draw an income from. And your house is much the same. So if you've got a house and you own that, you do need shelter from the elements. You need somewhere to live. We all need that. But it doesn't form a part of your retirement savings. Whereas your superannuation fund, that money, as you put all the time, Michael, that money is the money that's going to get up, get dressed and go to work for you and that you're going to draw an income from. And so when I talk about this, you often look at it with people's balance sheet approaching retirement. Their house is a more valuable item than their car, and so they think of it as forming a part of that. But it isn't really an asset for the purpose of these calculations. It's really just, it's a consumption item. It's something that you need. It's something that you will use up over your lifetime. But it's not an asset for those purposes. It's not like your super fund.
Yeah, and there is a cost to holding cars, and there is a cost to holding houses as well. And people don't often appreciate the real cost of that.
Yes.
We've done quite a few podcasts on where these figures have actually come into the podcast, and the figures that we believe are the holding costs of a property. Look, everyone I think knows about, of course, rates and water. Yeah. And we have that, conservatively at about $2,500 per year. It's more expensive where we live. Yeah. We also have insurance at about $2,500 per year. Now that is a lot more expensive where we live in North Queensland because of cyclones. But if we're fair and we say they average out at $2,500 for rates and water, $2,500 for insurance, you're at $5,000. Maintenance we have at a real rough rule of thumb, 1.25% of the value of the property, and that includes the value of the land as well. So people are shocked when they hear that figure. But if we break it down, what that really is a paint inside and out every 15 years. That's $40,000 or thereabouts. If you break that down to an annual figure, that's $2,666 you're spending every year on painting. Now, it doesn't come
every year.
It comes every 15 years. But it still comes. Replace split system air conditioning every 15 years. Now, you may live in a part of Australia that doesn't require that. I'm sure there might be some costs there that you have for heating. But if you live in a hot part, then that's about $20,000 for the average house for every 15 years. and that's a cost annually then just for replacing air conditioning.
Yep.
$1,333. Replace bathrooms, kitchen, floor coverings every 20 years. So what I'm talking about there is a new bathroom, a new kitchen, and replacing floor coverings every 20 years. I've just put down $50,000 for that, roughly.
Yep.
So that's $2,500 per year. If you then look at general maintenance every year, electrician, a plumber, etc., about $1,000 a year. So you're at $7,500 per year.
Yep.
And on a $600,000 house, that's where your 1.25% rule of thumb comes in. Now, people say to me, what's the alternative? Like, I'm not. It's not realistic that I'm probably going to rent in retirement, and that may be the case. I think that's a fair enough comment.
Yep.
But what people are surprised because what they assume is when they own their house fully outright and they've paid it off,
there's no cost.
Somehow they've got an assumption here that there's no cost or there's very little cost, and they're shocked.
Yes.
When we add up the rates and water, $2,500, the insurance $2,500 to be conservative, and then the maintenance an average of $7,500 a year. You're sitting at somewhere around the $12,500 running cost mark per year.
And I think that's I guess my point, or the way that to think about this. It's not that you shouldn't own a house. It's not that you don't, for some people you are going to own a house. It's just mentally categorizing that thing in the right place. Like if you own a $50,000 car and you plan to keep that car, throughout the 20, 30 years of your retirement, yes, you could sell that car for some money, but it doesn't form a part of it. It's just categorizing your house in the same way that we categorize your car, where you go, there's some value there, there's some saleable value, but it's not an asset that's going to generate you an income. It's not an asset that's going to get dressed and get up and go to work for you. It is a consumption item. And so there's, I guess, two parts to this, is that your house is a consumption item in the same way that your car is a consumption item. And what I mean by that is, if you're driving more car than what you need, if you're going to church once on a Sunday 2 kilometres away and you've got an $80,000 4x4 brand new Land Cruiser, that's probably a bit of overkill. You're paying for more car than what you need. You're consuming more car than what you need. The same thing applies with your house. If you've got a 5-bedroom, 2-bathroom house, because that's sort of the house that you had when you had 3 kids at home and that's where you live, there is a cost to running that house throughout your retirement, and you are consuming that house throughout your retirement. Now, again, you might make a choice to say that's what I am going to consume. That's what I'm going to spend on house every year. That's fine, but that's a decision that you need to make. Where I think people become a bit unstuck here is that they think of that as, I've got more house than what I need, in the same way that I've got more car than what I need, but it's okay, that's an asset. And my point here is, with a car, it's very tangible. I know that car is going to depreciate in value over the next 30 years. So if I'm retiring at 65 and I've got a 30-year retirement life expectancy like most couples, I know that my car, if I can get through the next 30 years with just my car, the car's not going to be worth much at the end of it. With your house, this is, I guess, where I would actually separate this out. We talk about a house as though it's a property, it's one thing. If you think about your home is made up of 2 components here. There's the actual structure of the house, and then there's the land. Now, over the next 30 years, I'm not making a judgment call on what the land value will be. Historically, land has appreciated at around the rate of inflation, and we've gone into all that in detail before as to why that is the case. But historically, that's what happened. In some cases, land has appreciated by more than that, in some less. The point I'm talking about here is the house component, is the structural thing that sits on top of the land. If you have, as you just touched on there, Michael, if you have a house that is sitting there and it's going to sit there for the next 30 years, the elements are just going to beat away at that thing for the next 30 years, especially here in Townsville. And in 30 years, the actual value of the house, of the structure itself, is going to be less than what it is now, unless you are spending significant amounts every year on maintaining it, updating it, keeping it basically new. So that's, I guess, part two of my thoughts here around this is that when I say your house is more like a car than a super fund, it means that it doesn't form a part of your assets for retirement savings. You can't draw an income from it. It's not something that will do the work for you and allow you to draw an income from. Secondly, the actual house itself is not an asset that's going to grow over time. Now, the land value may, but the house itself is not going to grow. It's going to be consumed slowly over time.
Yeah, I think of it a little bit of a different way.
Yeah.
What I think of it is that I have to sink 1.25% of the value of the house into the house every year to maintain its value, to tick it along with inflation.
Yes. Yeah.
So, yeah, over a 30-year period, basically at 1.25% per year, it's what's that, 37.5% I've actually put into...
Yeah, you basically replaced the...
It's cost me 37.5% of the value of the house that I can sell it for at that point in time.
Yeah.
Yes, it's ticked along with inflation.
Yeah.
But each and every year that I'm doing remembering that each and every year that I'm doing any works on it, the cost of those goes up as well. So the price of the house ticks along and goes up. But my 1.25% is getting bigger every year in dollar terms that I'm putting into it. Forget what I was, forget all that.
Yeah.
Just think of that in percentage terms. Whatever I can sell the house for, if I've held the house for 30 years,
I've already consumed that.
I've actually put about 37.5% of the value of that saleable value. I've actually put into keeping that house in a state of repair that I need to have it maintain and grow its value. So it's quite a bit when you think of that, whatever I'm selling for, let's just call it a third. A third of that house. If you get a visual, a third of that house, it's cost you. Besides paying it off and all those types of things, it's cost you another third of that house
just to keep it
it ticking along with inflation. Now, I mean, a car works a little bit differently because you don't, reupholster a car generally, and you don't, you don't do all those sorts of things.
A good example, though.
But basically, a car drops in value. But it's a similar thing. It's cost you. It's actually either depreciated in value or it's cost you money
to keep it at that
keep it at that value.
And that's what's the old the thought experiment, George Washington's father's axe or Theseus's ship, or there's all sorts of things here where if you've got granddad's good old been around for 100 years, I've replaced the handle 6 times and I've replaced the head of it 5 times. Is that still granddad's axe, or is it
you
not?
Still think of it as the same original
same
axe
item? And that's, like you say, when you sell your house in 30 years' time, you think of it as, I'm selling that house. The land is the same. Of the actual house itself, maybe the internal structure is the same. That's about it. The walls have probably been, it's probably been resheeted. It's probably been painted 4 times. It's probably, there's all these different things that have happened. It's actually a different item, and that's where the cost has gone in to keep that running. And so,
and we're certainly saying, we're not saying don't do this. I'd be a massive hypocrite.
Well, I was about to say, no, I am saying don't. This is the beauty of this discussion for me, is that we've already talked about this. Yeah, Michael, you own your own home. I don't own my own home. You like you say, if I'm willing to say, no, just don't do it. You should just rent. But for most people, as you said, and for yourself, owning your own home is a lifestyle decision. It's a choice that you've made. It's not to say you shouldn't do that. It's not to say that you shouldn't that you should sell your home or anything like that. It's just that you've got to take those true costs into account.
Yeah, look, and I certainly put my hand up and I recognise that there is a significant cost to owning a home.
Yeah,
and I'm in the middle of bearing that cost right now. I mean, it's a situation where we're about to do significant renovations. So like I'll be able to share that information as to how much that costs, but it's from initial estimates, it's quite a lot. It's a big like the house is 16, 17 years old. So some of these renovations are past due date.
Yes.
The 15-year mark, and there's others that are about to come due at the 20-year mark. So it's sort of, that's a rough guide as well.
Yeah.
But it is. I mean, you wouldn't find too many houses where the kitchen and the bathrooms are functional after 20 years. So that's all approaching that stage at our house, and that's about to get done. So,
and I think my main point with this as well is when I say think of your house more like a car than a super fund. The car thing is interesting because we've talked about this. When people are approaching retirement, they say things like, "I'll buy a new car and that'll see me out." I'm going, not many cars I know of that are going to be drivable in 30 years' time. So the same thing applies with your house. If you're looking at what are my expenses throughout retirement, what are my income needs, even though you own your own home, you still have to allow a significant amount for that upkeep of that and for the replacement of those things, and all of that cost, like you're saying, that really has to be borne throughout that 30 years just to keep that as a livable proposition. So it's really just about being honest about what is the real cost of holding that property and making sure that you can afford to do that. And like I said, if you're in a situation where you have, in the same way that you maybe don't need the brand new Land Cruiser for $70,000, but if you can afford to do it, why not? It's a choice that you've got to make. If you're paying for more house than what you need, that's completely fine. That's just a personal decision. As long as you can afford to do that, and as long as you are going to sustainably be able to do that throughout your retirement.
Yeah, and look, there's really three main options, isn't there? There's retain the existing house that you have.
Yeah.
It's go the other end of the spectrum, which is to sell and rent.
Yep.
And with the sale proceeds, contribute that into your superannuation fund or investments.
Yeah.
And actually use some of the rent to pay. Some of the rate of return to pay the rent.
Yep.
Or it's to find a middle ground there.
Yep.
And the middle ground is to downsize.
That's exactly right.
And do half and half there effectively. Put some of that downsized money into superannuation, ideally.
Yeah.
Draw an income from it. Have it invested in something that's going to outpace inflation.
Yep.
And live in a potentially downsized, smaller residence at that point in time. So
yeah, that's exactly right. And so, like I said, I think this isn't necessarily a podcast where there's a concrete takeaway. It's for me just more around recategorizing, thinking of that as what are your choices around your housing throughout your retirement? What sort of house do you want to live in those early years and then in later years, and recognizing that there is a cost that house is an investment. It's something that I'm going to consume over the next 30 years. How much house do I want to consume, and am I willing to pay the price for that? And making that choice. And like always, it's about those trade-offs of what else could I do with that money, and what am I willing to trade off in order to have that.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Thank you for listening to the Money Over 50 podcast with Money Over 50 Financial Advisors. We look forward to catching up again soon.